I'm Carly Mercier. I'm Policy Manager at New Zealand Drug Foundation. Sitting here in Wellington, this is my colleague Stephen Blythe, who is Communications Manager. Lovely day in Wellington today. I hear people have signed in from all around the country, which is great, from down south in Invercargill all the way up north to Kaitaia. So welcome to Wellington virtually. I am going to talk a bit about the bill, the Misuse of Drugs Act Medicinal Cannabis Amendment Bill, to give it its full glorious name. And I'm also going to talk to you a bit about how you do submissions on that bill. So the purpose of this series of lectures that we're doing really is to demystify the process so that people find it easy to make a submission to get their voice heard. And we're particularly interested in getting the voices of patients heard, because the government generally will mostly be hearing from professional medical associations and policy advisors, but really important they hear from people out there who are from patients, from carers, from support people who have personal experience of medicinal cannabis. So yeah, we're here to try and help you feel confident about the process, to demystify it and to show you that it's actually just a really simple thing to do and really important. Your democratic right to make yourself heard. Politicians are elected to represent you in Parliament, and this is your way of making sure they know what you think. So yeah, what I'll do is I'll talk for about 20 minutes first, take you through the submission process and a bit about the bill, what it says, what we think is good about it, what we think is bad about it, what we think should change, and then we'll have a Q&A session after that. So hopefully we'll have a good 20 minutes to half an hour of Q&A at the end. Feel free to ask any question you want. Nothing's too stupid. Just go for it. Yeah, but before I start talking about the substantive stuff, Stephen is just going to briefly talk to you about how the technology works.
Yeah, hi. The meeting today is being broadcast using Zoom meetings. Some of you may have used that before. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the key features, because as we advertised it, we do want this to be about an online Q&A, and we want to accept questions. So what I'm going to show you here is just the main ways that you can ask questions. Now, on your page, this photo was taken a little bit before. You'll see down the bottom a little strip, and it's got three different options for interacting. Those three things are Q&A, raising your hand, and chat. Now, so if you've got a question, please, the best way to do that is to enter it into the Q&A box, and that pops up when you click on Q&A at the bottom of the screen. Or if you're using a mobile device like an iPad or something like that, that bar is at the top. The other thing that you can do is that you can raise your hand. Particularly do that if you're having a little bit of problem with the sound or some technical thing you need a little bit of help on that, and one of the team will do their best to help out. And then the final thing that you can do is chat. Now, you can send a message to any of the team here at the Drug Foundation, or you can send out a message that goes to everyone. I'm hoping that you're clicking on that now, and you'll see that I put a question in there asking where people have come from. Yeah, we really want to encourage people to feel at home, grab your cup of tea and sit back, but do feel that you can ask questions as we go. Yeah, so as well as Carly and me here broadcasting live, we've got Natalie, our communications advisor behind the scenes, ready to answer any technical questions, and Anna Tonks. She's actually in Auckland today, and she is also helping with the facilitation. The session today is being recorded, and we haven't quite decided how that'll be made available, but we'll look to share that if there's demand. And yeah, I think that's about it. If you do have other questions, please feel free to raise them through the chat. And now I'm going to hand it back to Carly, and I'm going to deftly stop sharing the screen, and Carly's going to talk.
Actually, you can put the the first slide up there.
Oh, okay.
That'd be good. So I just wanted to quickly talk to you about the legislative process for those that don't know much about how a bill becomes law. So a bill is just basically a proposed law, and it may be written by government or an MP. In this case, the government has written this particular bill. So the first, you hopefully have a slide there explaining how it goes through Parliament. So first you'll have the first reading, and all MPs will get to vote on whether the bill goes through to the Select Committee, and that's happened. The MPs have all agreed to put this bill to Select Committee, and that's where it is now, and that's where you have a chance to make submissions on the bill. So once it's gone through the Select Committee, they'll make a report on the bill, and then probably make some changes, hopefully on the basis of your submissions, and then it will keep going through the process. It'll have a second reading, so it goes back to Parliament. Everyone has another chance to debate on it. If it passes that reading, then it will go to what's called the Committee of the Whole House, where MPs will look at each part of the bill in detail and discuss each bit and really nut it out in detail, and then we'll have another iteration of the bill, which will then go to the third reading, and if that passes, then the bill will become an act or a law, or also known as a statute. So that's basically how a bill becomes law. So this medicinal cannabis bill is currently at the Select Committee stage, and we have the next slide, please. The Select Committee, there are about 17 of these in Parliament, and they all look at different subjects. So this particular one is the Health Select Committee that's been asked to look at this bill. There are 8 members, half of them are National, half of them are Labour, and the chairperson is Lewis Wall. So these are basically the 8 characters that you need to convince of your point of view. Sometimes members can change, but the likelihood is that it'll be these 8 that will be hearing your submission. And you'll have 2 chances also to influence them, once with your written submission and then once with your oral submission. So when you do your written submission, you have an option to say, I would like to present orally as well, and we really encourage you to do that. And then so you can then go along to Parliament and talk to them about your submission as well. And as I said before, really keen to get patients, carers, support people to do submissions. It's a really important part of the democratic process. It's not that hard, it's not that scary, and we're very happy to help you do it if you have any problems as well, so just be in touch. Also, I just wanted to emphasise that MPs really love to hear people's personal stories. If you've ever been along to a Select Committee hearing, it's when someone starts talking about their personal story and how this bill personally impacts them on the ground, that MPs suddenly wake up. They'll be sort of sitting there all dozy, and then they suddenly, it's a human nature thing, I guess, to find personal stories really engaging. So the more personal stories we can get in the submission process, the better. So next slide. Can I just have a look at that one? Yeah, so this is the website you'll go to when you're doing your submission, and I will send you an email after this which has all the details you need to know about how to link into this and so on. You can place that now if you want. It's probably not so interesting to just stare at that the whole time. So the submissions are due on the 21st of March, which I think is actually creeping up on us and may even be next week. In fact, it is. It's Wednesday next week, so we haven't got much time. It's been a really abbreviated submission process this time, unfortunately. So we've had to do these workshops in a bit of a rush. So it's important to get your personal story into your submission. We'll be doing quite a technical submission probably. And feel free to leave all the technical details to us and other organisations that are working on behalf of patient rights, and just keep it really simple. I mean, you can get into the technical stuff if you want, but you can also just keep it simple. Say, this is my story, this is what I need the bill to do for me. It's also worth noting that, as I said before, you can say that you want to do an oral submission, and the Select Committee can, on occasion, travel to different locations. So if you have an issue travelling through disability, or because you have no money because you're on a sickness benefit, do say that in your submission. Say, I can't make it, but I would love to present to you. If we have enough people doing that, they may very well travel around New Zealand. I mean, it's unlikely they'll go to the small centres, but they could very well go to Christchurch, Auckland. So put that in your submission. And then when it comes to actually writing your submission, the things you have to think about are keep it simple, keep it clear. If it's long, it's a good idea to have subheadings so that the MPs can just read it really fast. Because if you think about it, they've got probably a pile of papers about this big on their desk every morning. Have got very limited time. They'll be spending limited time on your written submission. So make sure they can work out what you're saying and what you're recommending within the first minute or two that they're looking at it. If they have to wade through an awful lot of stuff to get to your key points, they may very well give up. But again, you've got another chance to put your view through on the in the oral submission process. And we recommend you do that because much easier, I think, to convince someone of something when you're sitting right in front of them looking at them than when you're writing. But both are important. Also with your written submission, run it by a friend. It's really important to have the grammar and the spelling and all that accurate. So if you're not very good at that stuff, get someone else to take a look at it. It's really not something to be worried about. You can write a paragraph if you want. You can write 2 paragraphs, or you can write a book. It's up to you. Do recommend if you have a book that you have maybe a sort of a contents and an executive summary in it. But yeah, just think about, will my message be able to get across clearly and quickly to the people that matter? Other things you have to put in: your name, your contact details. If you're doing a written submission and not online, if you're actually sending a paper copy to Parliament, put those details, your contact details, on a separate page so they don't form part of the written submission. Which leads me to the next main point, which is that privacy. So your submission will be actually public. It'll be published on the Parliament website. So just think about, is this going to land me in any legal difficulties? Should I admit I'm growing 6 cannabis plants in the garden? Probably not. But realistically, if you say you consume cannabis from time to time because of a medical issue, it's fairly unlikely that you would get into legal trouble, but you just need to be aware that you need to do balance that risk. Also, don't give personal details about another individual's health issues without their permission as well. So firstly, I wanted to talk a little bit, before we get into the substance of the bill, I wanted to talk a bit about what is medicinal cannabis, because it's a quite confusing subject to everyone, including us. And the reason for that is that whoever you're talking to will have a different way of defining it for themselves. So you just need to be aware that you're talking about medicinal cannabis, the person you're talking to may actually understand something quite different from you. So some people, when they talk about medicinal cannabis, will mean the whole plant. So something maybe that they're growing in their garden, which they use to medicate their health condition. They might smoke it, they might use it, make it into an oil or a tincture, some kind of extract. They may bake it and eat it. So there's lots of different ways, or they might vape it. So there's different ways to take it. And there's lots of scientific evidence now that cannabis is really effective for a lot of different health conditions as well. I think that's pretty much beyond dispute that it's very effective for some conditions. So other people, when they talk about medicinal cannabis, will talk about it as a pharmaceutical product. So something that's been made by a company in a lab, and that has extracts from the cannabis plant in it. So, for example, Sativex or Tilray. It may have CBD in it, which is cannabidiol, which is one of the component parts of cannabis, or it may have THC in it, but most likely it will have a combination of those 2 compounds plus some other compounds as well. So yeah, when you're doing your submission, just be aware that you're quite clear about whether you're talking about using the botanical plant or whether you're talking about using a pharmaceutical product. So the next thing is the legal situation in New Zealand. So cannabis is obviously illegal. It's a controlled drug under the Misuse of Drugs Act. So you can't just smoke it. However, doctors can prescribe it for various conditions, or for any condition really, provided they can get the Ministry of Health to approve that prescription. So it has to go through quite a long-winded process if you do want to get medicinal cannabis, or pharmaceutical medicinal cannabis at the moment. And then of course you can't grow your own at the moment. That's strictly against the law. So although it's officially available in New Zealand, it's pretty hard to get. Only about 255 people, as of last December, I think, had actually managed to get Sativex prescribed to them in New Zealand since 2008. Can we have the next slide, please? So the various barriers for people currently to get medicinal cannabis are things like the cost. So Sativex, which is can be prescribed for multiple sclerosis at the moment without Ministry of Health approval, but which needs approval from Ministry of Health for any other condition. That can cost up to $1,200 a month, so it's not a cheap process at all. There's also not very many really good products available internationally at the moment, up to that high pharmaceutical grade standard. And then of course the medical profession doesn't know much about it. They don't get taught about the endocannabinoid system, I don't think, at medical school. So there's a lot of resistance and lack of knowledge from doctors about prescribing it. From some, others are more open. And then of course another main barrier is the legality of it currently. So moving along to the next slide, which is about the cannabis bill itself. So you may have been aware there were two bills. The first one didn't pass its first reading, and that was put forward by the Green Party. So that bill would have legalised cultivation, purchase, possession and use for people suffering from a debilitating illness. And the other one, so that didn't go through. So the government bill doesn't allow you to grow your own cannabis at all. It's really focused on paving the way for domestic production of medicinal cannabis products. So it's about trying to make products more available in New Zealand. And what it also does is it gives a statutory exemption and defence to terminally ill patients who are found to be using botanical or grow your own cannabis in the meantime until that domestic market is established. So until there are good products available, if you have a terminal illness and you're found to be using cannabis, you won't be prosecuted. And that's the one that we're looking at the moment, that bill. So the bill itself doesn't really, it's quite vague, doesn't really give an awful lot of information about how this is all going to work, what it all looks like. Basically, we had to go and look at all the cabinet papers that the Ministry of Health had written to the government to explain this whole thing in order to understand what the bill was trying to say. It's a very confusing bill. In fact, I don't even recommend you read it because you'll be probably less wise afterwards than you were before. So basically what the government is trying to do is develop a system whereby we can make the products in New Zealand and have better access to them also by importing more products. So they want to set up an agency to oversee cultivation, develop minimum quality standards for products. That means that doctors would be able to be confident that what they were prescribing had the same potency every time, had the same ratio of THC and CBD every time, didn't have mold in it, didn't have pesticides in it. So the doctor would know that they were getting a quality product. And that would hopefully then give them the confidence to prescribe it. The government's also, outside of the legislation, trying to make it easier to import products. They're going to set up this advisory committee, hopefully including a patient voice, and that advisory committee will be asked to advise on whether it's going to be possible to simplify the current prescribing process. So that's what I was talking about when you have to go to the Ministry of Health each time you want a prescription to make sure that they approve that this product is used for your condition at this time. So hopefully that committee will be set up and we'll find that it's not necessary to go through Ministry of Health to get approval every time, and it is actually an easier way to do it, and this is the easier way. So hopefully it'll be easier to access products. Hopefully under the scheme it will be easier to import products as well. That's another thing that they'll be advising on. So that's really the main gist of the government bill. And then this other thing is the the thing that's had the most attention really is the bit about terminally ill patients not being prosecuted. So that is actually not the major focus of the bill. It's just a temporary thing. So they're going to look at that again in 2020 and decide whether they still need to keep that in. So the government, I think, is intending for when all these products become available in New Zealand, and we've got a really good range of products and good quality products, then there's no reason for people to be growing their own at home. So, you know, if you think that there still would be a reason to grow your own at home, then do put that in your submission. And the other thing that this government bill does is it deschedules CBD products, which is the cannabidiol, which I was talking about before. That's actually really happened already in the regulations, I think last September, so doctors can already prescribe CBD products. So this is really just a formality that they're going to you know, put that into the law itself rather than just the regulations. Yeah, so that is the government intentions. I wanted to talk a little bit about what this really means. So setting up a system in New Zealand is a really good thing and could be wonderful for patients. Very in favour of it. But one thing to really think about is that it could take a lot of time. So in Australia, they've tried to do something similar, and they've spent, can you just put my face up? Yeah. They've spent about 3 years, I think, now working on it and haven't yet got any product to market. So that's something to think about. The other thing to think about is that we're having to submit by 21st of March on this bill, but the problem is the actual detail of the bill is not going to be there until they write the regulations that will accompany the bill. So the regulations are just all the various detailed rules that would sit alongside the law. What this bill does is put most of the work of the thinking process around how medicinal cannabis would look and who would get it and how you would prescribe it. That all goes into the regulations, not the bill. So we're really making submissions on quite a vague bill, which is an issue. We won't really know what the government intends for the bill until they've actually written the regulations, and the government doesn't really know yet what's going to be in those regulations. So that's a problem. But I think what that means for us when we make submissions is that we need to set out how we think a regulatory system should look, what products we think should be available, what they should look like. Should they be whole plant products, or should they be only be pharmaceutical grade tinctures, or what do we think needs to go, and what do we think the regulations need to actually do for patients? So we've got a good opportunity really to help the Ministry of Health to formulate their thinking around how the final system will actually look and what conditions we'll be able to prescribe for and what products we'll be able to prescribe. So if you have good thoughts about that, do put that in your submission as well. So I think that was all on the actual Act itself. If we go to the next slide, please, Stephen.
Sure, yep.
Yes. So the key things, I just want to go really quickly through the key things that we think could be improved about this bill. So the first one is my comment before, that we don't really know yet what's going to be in the regulations, and that makes it really hard to submit on it, and ideally we'd like an opportunity to submit later as well once we know what the actual regulations will be. The second point is that the statutory defence, so the bit that says you won't be prosecuted if you're found with botanical cannabis, that only applies to terminally ill patients, not their support people. So if you are looking after a terminally ill patient and give them some cannabis because they're not able to source it themselves, or to take it themselves because they're so ill, then you would actually be liable, and not just for possessing it, but supplying it as well, which is actually a higher penalty. So we don't really think that that's just. You know, if you're really sick, how are you going to get hold of it yourself anyway? It's not really logical for us. So the Ministry of Health's idea about this was that enforcement was going to be too difficult, because it would be too hard to define which support people were supplying the patient, and how much they needed to supply to the patient, and just in general, they were worried that a compassionate grower, or someone who was growing on behalf of another person who was sick, may end up arguing that the statutory defence would cover their activity, which I think, is actually, well, why not? But that's what the Ministry of Health advised the Minister. So there's systems set up around the world that actually get over these problems. So I don't think that was a good reason not to include a defence for support people. I think there's ways that we could actually write a really good, robust law around that, and we'll be putting some of those details into our submission. Yeah, and so the number 3, patients with other conditions will not be covered. So it's including severe pain. So there's a range of different conditions that medical cannabis has been shown to work for. So it's a shame that they weren't put into this as well. So the 100-day plan of the government said that they would be looking at providing medicinal, or finding a way to get medicinal cannabis to the public for terminal illness and chronic pain. They've taken chronic pain out. They've only applied it to terminal illness, unfortunately, in this defence. And the reason for that was that the Ministry of Health advised that chronic pain is too difficult to define, subjective, and would potentially cover a large patient group. So they said 21% of the population may at some point have chronic pain, and therefore that's too wide a group to extend this particular law to. They're basically afraid of legal dispute for extending it too widely. We think that's a lost opportunity. They could have come up with a different wording than chronic pain if they didn't like that one. So they could have, for example, said extended it to severe and debilitating illness, or they could have said a condition that a doctor certifies as a genuine one, or there would have been different ways to word that so that it wasn't just restricted to terminal illness. Number 4, the statutory defence lets patients obtain or consume cannabis but not cultivate it. So this one, yeah, this is probably one of the big bones of contention, that this bill, other than the Greens bill, whereas the Greens bill would have allowed you to cultivate your own cannabis to use, this one doesn't. So if that's something that's important to you, do put that into your submission. So under the current bill, patients will still have to get their cannabis from the black market until the point where the domestic market is able to supply product easily in an affordable, accessible way to people. There's no desperation for people who might be growing their own cannabis. So if a terminally ill person were growing their own cannabis, they wouldn't have a defence for that. Or if someone else is growing for them, there'd be no defence for them as well. So I think the Ministry of Health was most concerned here about trying to police growing. Like, how would you know that if someone said they were growing for a terminally ill person, how would you know that they were definitely growing for them and not for the black market? They were also worried, some of the MPs were worried that having access to medicinal cannabis in terms of a whole plant growing in the garden could lead to quasi-legalisation or quasi-legalisation of recreational cannabis, and that maybe young people would have more access to it. So that was some of the arguments that MPs gave in the first reading. And again, we think there's actually good systems set up around the world, say, for example, in Canada, where they have a regulatory system which sets out in detail how all these issues can be got around. So I don't think that they were really valid reasons not to extend this particular bill to growing and cultivating at home. Right, so are there any questions at the moment? Because I was going to talk about the oral submission process next, but we could talk if there's any questions that you think we haven't covered off, Stephen.
Kind of got one question statement come through, so right. Maybe we'll just mix things up a bit and to get people in the frame of mind that we do want to have any other questions come through. I'll read this out, but unless all you people out there want to override me, and you could raise your hand if you want to hear from Carly now. So I see a lot of hands go up, otherwise I'll read this question. Everyone's frantically searching to raise their hands, I can tell. Yeah, this has come through from one of our participants. I don't think I qualify as a patient, but I also think I can exist without cannabis in my life. I don't think I can exist without cannabis in my life on a daily basis, but that makes me a criminal to stay well and balanced. I suffer from insomnia, loss of appetite, and anxiety. I will not take the medication given to me by my doctors as the side effects are unbearable.
Yeah. Oh yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that comment. So those are actual conditions, anxiety and inability to sleep and loss of appetite. Those are serious conditions, and cannabis has been shown, I think, quite conclusively to help with those conditions. So it's worth making a submission about that and saying, you know, this is the condition that I really need help with, and this is the reasons I can't take other medications. This is the reason cannabis is really important to me. And, you know, those conditions are perfectly valid for use for medicinal cannabis. So put that down, right, that it's important to you and why, you know, you may think that you have a right to access medicine that helps you if it's not harming anyone else. So I would argue that was a human right. And in fact, there was a Supreme Court case in Canada which decided that yes, it is a human right to be able to access medicine that exists if it's not harming other people. So yeah, write that down, please do. Thanks for that.
Well, at this stage,
So looks like we have another question.
yeah, here we have another question which I'll read out. I need to come back on the screen. I thought I was going to get away with that. I have multiple sclerosis. I wonder if there's any possibilities to get cannabis patches for my back, shoulder pain. Should I ask my doctors?
Yeah, so multiple sclerosis is one of the ones that that Sativex would be available for. I mean, I'm not an expert on the different medications, and you're definitely worth talking to your doctor about. And if you don't get any joy there, it's probably worth contacting Medical Cannabis Awareness New Zealand, MCANS, and I can send you the link for that. But so multiple sclerosis, it's possible, yeah, that would be helpful for you, but definitely worth talking to your doctor or neurologist about.
So
but I'm more of an expert on the policy side of things, not the medical side of things. So yeah, I probably can't help you in detail on that one, sorry. So if we might just head back now to the to my presentation. I just wanted to talk to you about oral submissions. So as I said, when you write your written submission, you can say, hey, I'd really like to do an oral submission, and we recommend you do that. Even if you actually don't feel like it, just write it in there and you can make a decision about it later. So a few weeks after you do your written submission, you probably get a phone call or an email from the clerk of the select committee saying, hey, are you free on this date to do a presentation in Wellington? At that point you can pull out if you don't really want to do it, so just put it in your submission anyway. But ideally you will do it, and as I say, you have to come to Wellington unless they do decide to travel. So this is a picture of a submission room. There's a few different submission rooms. This is the biggest one, and I've never had to submit in there. It's usually in a smaller one, which is much less daunting looking. But I suspect medicinal cannabis might be popular, so they might put it in the bigger room. So you've got, if you can look at the tables there, you've got those two people in the middle with the white and the red are the people presenting or submitting, and they're talking to, we've got the chair at the end, opposite end, that will be Lewis Award, and then you've got the, I think the Labour people down the left and the National MPs down the right. And then over on the left, you've probably, those will be the various clerks who do the administration and work out who's speaking next and all that sort of stuff. And possibly the policy advisors will be sitting there as well from the Ministry of Health. And then of course you've got the audience and the media will be set up along the front here in the foreground. So although it looks daunting, it's actually just not that scary once you sit. It's actually quite fun once you start presenting. That's my experience. So may feel a little nervous, but it's well worth it because you're actually going to be heard by a lot of people who have a real interest in this topic, and you could actually impact, you know, what they decide in the end. So The other thing to think about is that we at the Drug Foundation, me and my colleagues, will be very happy to help you prepare your submission or to rehearse it. We'd also be happy to go down there with you. We'll be probably lurking about Parliament for most of the process, so we can meet you outside, we can take you in, we can make it as easy as it possibly can be for you. So don't be afraid to go and do a submission. There's also the option to come in on telephone if you can't travel and if they're not going to travel. I mean, ideally you will be there in person because it makes a much bigger impact, but if you can't do that, then you can beam in on telephone as well to tell your story. Let's see, so you can take your friends and family along to support you. You can take us along to support you if you want. You probably get about 5 to 10, or somewhere between 5 and 15 minutes, probably around 10 minutes on average. You should stick to a very few key messages because that time will go really quickly. So just choose maybe 2 or 3 key messages. Whatever you do, don't read out of your submission because it's incredibly boring and everyone will just go to sleep. But if you do want to write some key notes down and then to read them out, that's absolutely fine. But don't read from the submission because they've already seen that in theory and read it and absorbed it. Also, if you've got 10 minutes, then make sure you leave 5 of those minutes for questions from the MP. So this is the time for the MPs to really dig deep and find out, to ask questions from real people who are experiencing these things. So they'll really want to ask questions, but they'll usually get ruthlessly cut off at the 10-minute point or 15-minute point. So try and leave a lot of space for them to ask questions. Things to think about, try and structure your talk before you go so you know roughly what you're going to be talking about. Ideally practice in front of the mirror or in front of friends or in front of us. We can help you. As I said before, we'd be happy to rehearse it with you. And the reason for this is that we've been to lots of submissions and seen lots of people present and not put their best foot forward, I guess, not really make the most of this opportunity. So we'd like to make sure that people who are presenting are really grabbing that opportunity and making the most of it. Other thing to think about is you can go early in the morning. Say you're on at 11, you can go first thing, like check online on the Parliament website when they're starting, turn up at the beginning, and then you can get a sense for what's being said already and what the mood is, and then you can pitch your talk. You can change your talk if something's come up a lot already. You can focus on the bits that haven't been covered yet. A really important thing is to stay polite. So you'll probably get MPs, or maybe it's just us that get this, but some of the MPs can be a little bit bolshy and ask rude questions because they don't agree with you. It's probably less likely to happen with patients talking, but with so the main thing is always stay polite, always stay friendly, don't get into some kind of aggressive argument or anything with the MPs. I guess it goes without saying, but it's still worth saying. Make sure you don't defame anyone. Make sure you don't say anything that could get you into legal hot water, same as with the written submission. And yeah, we can help you. We can help you formulate your key messages and stuff. So do be in touch. Oh, there's a question?
Yeah, we've got some.
Oh yeah, okay. What else? I think that was all. Oh yeah, you can also table extra material at that point if you've got supplementary information at the point that you're doing your oral submission. And it may be that that's worth doing if more advice has come out from the Ministry of Health in the meantime about what it intends to do in terms of how it sets up the regulations. You can also submit as a group, but recommend that if you do that, you have you rehearse together to make sure that one person's not going to just take up all the time. And yeah, so that's the submission process. And then I think we're going to turn to questions in a second, but I just also wanted to say quickly that there's other ways you can influence MPs as well outside of the select committee process. So after the second reading, as I said, it would go to the committee of the whole House, and then all MPs will discuss it. So it's worth you being in touch with your MP to talk to them about your views. So you can contact them by phone or email and go into the electorate office and talk to them, or you can write letters to all of the MPs or to specific ones that you think are key. You can write letters to the editor, and we'll be actually giving out, we'll email you a handout in a minute actually about the various different ways you can lobby to get your voice heard outside of the select committee process. So worth having a look at that. Yeah, so we've got some questions coming in, Stephen.
Yeah, hi everyone again. Thanks for sending through your questions. I'll just go through them. Got 3 here. Now the first one is the New Zealand Drug Foundation going to share the submission before the 21st so we can get some ideas of what to include?
Yeah, so that's a great question. In a dream world, we would have shared it with you already, but we're so busy running workshops, we haven't written it yet. So I'm hoping that the draft will be out a couple or a few days before it's due, and we'll do our best. But this week we're spending the whole week travelling, giving these workshops. We've got 2 in Auckland. Yeah, maybe we'll be able to put up a draft, but possibly not the final. But we will send you as much information as we have available. And I think if you've logged into this, we have your email. So we'll send you all the information that we've already got, various handouts. We'll send you a template that you can fill in to help you form your thinking. And yeah, if we've got the submission due in time, we will send it to you.
Yeah.
I mean, most of what we're saying is really reasonably clear on the website already, I think. Just some of the technical detail that we haven't really clarified yet. So, yeah, I think that's good. We can commit to sending it to you if it's ready and maybe sending you a draft if it isn't in advance, but it won't be very much in advance. Sorry, guys.
Okay, the next question we've got here is Juan asking, I'd really appreciate your help with my submission. How can we do this?
Yep, so I'm not sure if that's the written part or the oral part, but with the written part, I mean, you can first look at all our material to see if that answers your questions, and then if not, give us a call and we can talk through the structure, how you want to do it, the kinds of things that you might put in there, the kinds of things you wouldn't put in there. We can do that, and or we can actually have a look at the draft. I mean, I can't promise that we can give really good editing on everyone's drafts because there's potentially there's not that much time before it's due and we maybe run off our feet, but I could do our best. And we know 1 or 2 other patients and patient advocacy groups that may also be able to help. So if you're really struggling, just give us a call. And then when it comes to oral submissions, again, we'll probably be making our offices available for people to come in and rehearse, or we can rehearse in a cafe outside Parliament beforehand, whatever suits. Just be in touch if you feel you need help. We'll do our very best within capacity restrictions.
Yeah. So stay tuned. The email and details of how to get in touch with us are in a slide coming up, but you can also just get that off our website. I've got another question here. This is from Joe. Is this submission a place to address New Zealand, a referendum that's planned on medicinal and or recreational cannabis? I believe this is scheduled for 2020. Why can't a referendum happen sooner?
Yeah, so the referendum was part of the coalition agreement, and it's about recreational cannabis only. So it's due to happen by 2020 or before. They haven't actually set a date. It may actually happen before. I suspect that they'll probably want to keep it back till 2020 and attach it to the next election so that it's not, because it will be a lot cheaper. They won't want to get into that hot water that the last government got into with the flag referendum, that it was costing a huge amount of money. So they probably will want to attach it onto the next general election, that's my guess. So it's quite different, I think. So the needs of medicinal cannabis patients are quite different from the rights of recreational cannabis, people who use cannabis recreationally. Medicinal cannabis patients really need really good quality medicines, and that can be quite different from, access to. So some of the needs are the same. So for example, you don't want to, neither a recreational user nor a medicinal user should be prosecuted or made into a criminal, in my view, but they also are quite different because medicinal cannabis patients need quite a different system, and they need access to quite a lot more cannabis, quite a lot cheaper as well. So in Canada, for example, they have 2 different systems. well, actually recreational is still illegal, though you wouldn't be able to tell that from walking down the street in Canada now, but they've got a mail order system for medicinal cannabis, and or you can grow small amounts of your own if you register that with a health practitioner. And you can also, I think, now get it from dispensaries, so I don't think that's actually strictly legal. So we've got a mail order mostly system for medicinal cannabis, and they're going to have dispensaries for recreational cannabis. So they're keeping them quite separate, and I think that's probably right.
Okay, well, that's all the questions for now.
Okay.
And you've a couple more things to cover, haven't you?
No, I think I've actually got to the end of what I was wanting to say. There's a slide there about how you can get more information. Somewhere. I mean, basically, you can give us a call. You can go onto our website. If you look on go to our website and look on the policy pages, and then go to the medicinal cannabis page, and then under that, there's a whole section on how to do a submission, and that will take you through some of our the content stuff as well as the logistical stuff, and it gives you a link to the Parliament website there as well. You can also Google to find that, but it's actually really hard to find if you don't know exactly what to type in. The bill again is called the Misuse of Drugs Medicinal Cannabis Amendment Bill. If you Google that, you probably find it, but it might be easier to go through our website, which is drugfoundation.org.nz, and go onto the policy pages there. And yeah, you can email me. There's my email address. I may take a couple of days to get back because I'm traveling doing these workshops at the moment, but I'll do my very best to get back to you as soon as possible. It's really nice to hear from people, and to get the stories that people are experiencing, because that helps me do my job better as well. If I know, how things actually are for real people in the real world, that's really helpful, and I can feed that understanding into the submission that we're writing here as well. So thank you very much for tuning in. I don't think there's any point continuing if there's no more questions. Any more questions? I think we're all good. But yeah, if you do have questions that occur to you later, do be in touch. And thank you again for joining us. And I really hope you'll be making submissions. It's not hard. I'll send you a template in a minute, and you can just fill it in, send it off, easy peasy, well worth it. So thanks, guys, and good luck with the process, and enjoy the rest of your day.